What's up, YouTube? Welcome back to Celio's Network for Meta Monday, covering the standard format metagame for the week of October 12th. Today we're going to be looking at results from Hexter Top Deck 15 and Hexter Top Deck 17, which have kind of been the mainstays of my metagame analysis. So the Hexter Top Deck 15 was last Friday, October 2nd, and the Hexter Top Deck 17 was this past Friday, October 9th. So we'll be looking at these two tournaments a week apart from each other and kind of look at how the metagame developed, since there are some developments to analyze here. So in Hexter Top Deck 15, you'll see that ADPZ and Luke Metal took up about half of the meta, and there were 110 players here. So ADPZ and Luke Metal took up about half of the meta, but then that's drastically different in Hexter Top Deck 17, where Luke Metal fell off hard, and we have decks, we have Mew3 Welder, Senta Scorch, Baby Blounds, three decks that are positive versus Luke Metal coming up in play. Pikarom also historically a little bit positive versus Luke Metal. Then there's also Charizard Breaks, and right behind that another deck that's positive versus Luke Metal. So last week, Hexter Top Deck 15, Luke Metal coming in at 21 people playing it. Luke Metal actually won that tournament, which helped push the Luke Metal hype. And it looked like ADPZ and Luke Metal were going to be the two decks to beat. And now the meta has kind of shifted to beat those two decks, and I think we're coming back to an Eternatus dominated meta for next week. So with ADPZ and Luke Metal doing really well, that gave incentive to play things like Mew3 Welder, Senta Scorch, Baby Blounds, Pikarom, Charizard, and Breaks, and most of those decks gave reason to play Eternatus. So the counter saw play, which the counter was just that kind of stack of Welder decks, and then also Pikarom. But then the counter to the counter, which in theory would be Eternatus to an extent, also saw a jump in play for Hexter Top Deck 17. So I think we'll be seeing Eternatus jump up even more in play next week, because Luke Metal has really fallen off. But then we'll have this cycle of Luke Metal coming back, and then Luke Metal counters coming back, so then Eternatus becomes popular again. And I think we're just going to see that cycle keep going for this standard format, unless someone figures out like the formula to it. If someone can figure out a way to capitalize on all of it, or people just make the correct calls on when the shifts are going to happen. So yeah, the Mew3 Welder was very popular in the beginning of this standard format of Team Up Through Darkness Ablaze, and Mew3 Welder historically has a bad matchup to Eternatus, but a good matchup to ADPZ. I think ADP Zacian is just going to stick at either the first or second most popular deck from here on out. I don't imagine that really changing. But it was really neat to see that almost instant meta shift just a week between tournaments, and the Luke Metal dropped down drastically, and then the Luke Metal counter decks all rose in popularity. So these are just the meta shares. Also, shout out to everybody running these tournaments, and also to Cash for making these meta charts. So we also have the results from these tournaments to look at. So from Hexter Top Deck 15 and Hexter Top Deck 17, these are those results. Like I said, Hexter Top Deck 15, Gabriel Smart won with Luke Metal, so Luke Metal did end up winning that tournament. But the results for Hexter Top Deck 17 were a little bit wild. We've got Azul winning with Pikarom, then Charizard Breaks in Greens getting second, then Senta Scorch Ninetales getting third, and Senta Scorch getting fourth, with a Baby Blounds at fifth, and another Senta Scorch, this time Senta Scorch Greens Magneton at eighth. So 3 Senta Scorch decks, all different variants. Green's Charizard Breaks in at second. Also note that Green's Charizard Breaks in got third and fourth in Hexter Top Deck 15, and the same person, Tony Vuong, who got third and 15, made it into top 32 for the Hexter Top Deck 17. So these greens decks, especially the welder ones, the greens Charizard breaks in, they've been doing pretty well because they are favored versus ADPZ and Luke Metal. And if we just go back real quick to Hexter Top Deck 15, half the tournament was ADPZ and Luke Metal, so makes sense that this deck would do well. And I think that's somebody who's very people playing this are, or the people who started playing it in the beginning, so there were only a handful. Tony Vuong, Eric Blad playing the ADP Charizard breaks and greens, and the greens Charizard breaks, and both of which we covered in the Rogue deck video recently on this channel. Those people were cognizant of the good matchups that Charizard breaks and was able to take versus ADPZ and Luke Metal, and capitalized on that very, very well in Hexter Top Deck 15. And then we have copycats now playing greens Charizard breaks, and also greens Tina Champa, of course, still popping up a little bit. The greens decks with the tag teams are typically favored versus ADPZ because they don't play the ability support Pokemon onto the bench, and they have bulky Pokemon that Zacian can't one-shot in the active. Now Luke Metal and ADPZ still did just fine in Hexter Top Deck 17, but they were really overrun by the counter meta, in my opinion, which has become Pika Rom and the fire decks in general. Now Centiskorch, I do think Centiskorch is a meta deck itself, but seeing the 3 different variants of it pop up in top 8 of this 100-player tournament was very, very cool. And I think even though Centiskorch is considered a meta deck, it's still part of the counter meta because it popped up in it rose in popularity due to the heavy Luke Metal, heavy ADP Zacian, just heavy Zacian in general dominated format or meta from the previous Friday from Top Deck 15. And also, you know, Baby Blounds, Charizard breaks, and Pika Rom, Mew3 Welder, all these decks that are generally favored versus ADPZ and Luke Metal. So really interesting stuff. I expect in the coming week Eternatus to rise in popularity and potentially some of these decks fall off, since Centiskorch, greens breaks, and Pika Rom, Mew3 Welder, they all have, even if it's just slightly, they all have unfavored matchups to Eternatus. So I expect Eternatus to rise in popularity again, and in a couple weeks we'll be right back to Luke Metal doing well and being the popular deck. And if the cycle continues, if everything continues and follows suit to what these meta shifts have been so far for the month and a half we've been playing the standard format, it looks like Eternatus will become popular, and then Luke Metal will become popular, and then we'll have these Welder plus Pika Rom decks become popular again, and ADPZ will just be the mainstay of the metagame, probably at the first or second most popular deck, if I had to guess. So yeah, Eternatus looks like a good play unless people call that too heavily and are able to counter it preemptively with Luke Metal, but these Welder decks are probably going to stick around and give Luke Metal a little bit of a problem. This also means that Inteleon Frostmoth could come back like it did at the very, very early parts of this metagame. Inteleon Frostmoth could come back for next week or the week after if we are seeing this counter Luke Metal meta plus Eternatus. That could be the perfect time for Inteleon Frostmoth to strike. So that's all I have to say today about the metagame. Of course, shout out to my lovely sponsor, PotownStore.com, the best place for you to get PTCGO codes, and be sure to use code CELIO for 5% off. If you have any questions or comments, please let me know down below. Links to my Twitch, Patreon, Twitter, and all of that good stuff are available in the description. Hope you have a good day, and I'll see you next time here on Celio's Network.